G'day, I'm Paul. So in literally every single review we've published in the last, I reckon, 6 months, someone has asked, when are we going to review the Mahindra Scorpio? Well, guess what? Today is the day we're reviewing the Mahindra Scorpio, and I'm very excited. Just a very, very quick backstory. I actually had the chance to go to India like a little over 5 years ago and tour the Mahindra factory, and I know how much Indians love Mahindra products, so I'll be really keen to see what this is like here in Australian conditions. So the Scorpio is facelifted. It looks completely different to the previous generation, and now they're really sharpening up the offering in terms of price and also features. So this here is the top specification Scorpio Z8L, priced at just under $45,000, which is pretty affordable. If that is too expensive though, the entire range kicks off at just under 42 grand. So what does this compete with? Well, it's stuff like the SsangYong Rexton, the Mitsubishi Pajero Sport, the Isuzu MUX. It is a ladder frame chassis. It's kind of like a go anywhere four-wheel drive that will seat 6 people. So today we're going to do a detailed review of this car. So if you do want to skip ahead to other parts of this review, you can use the time codes on the screen, or if you're on YouTube, you can scroll down and use the chapters below. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon as well. That way you'll find out every single time we drive a nice looking green car. Now, just before we touch on exterior design, we're actually going to do a separate video on off-road in this because it has a stack of off-road features that I think are worth highlighting in a separate video. So when that goes live, you'll see a link in the description below. If it's already live, you will see a little card pop up on your screen there. Click on that one to check out the off-road review of this. So you get 5 exterior colors to choose from, and kind of weirdly, they're all free of charge. Normally you've got to pay for exterior colors, so it's good to see that they're free. I also love up here, it says Scorpio, the big daddy of SUVs, because, you know, when you look at this in terms of its size, it's a bit deceiving. In pictures it doesn't look that big, but here in person it actually has quite a lot of presence, and it is shorter than a Pajero Sport and a Prado, but it is quite wide, and I think it's that width that really gives it quite a presence out on the road. Just on the design front, this looks significantly better than the previous generation of this. They have softened it off a bit and given it a bit more of an SUV vibe. So you've got things like these chrome highlights, vertical slats here in chrome, big Mahindra logo there with a camera down the front here, and as you work your way further down, you've got a matte finish on this section and then silver down the bottom there. Headlights are a full LED headlight. You also have LED daytime running light and an LED fog light as well, which is pretty impressive. Round the side here, let's have a look at these wheels. So you're sitting on an 18-inch alloy wheel. The design's actually pretty good. So you've got a machined finish on the outside, graphite finish on the inside there. Big chunky tyre too, so that's a 60 profile tyre. So it should mean this is actually nice and comfortable out on the road. It is worth pointing out at this point as well that the suspension has actually been tuned specifically for Australia. And look, I mentioned before that I'd been to India, and I know that the Indian roads are completely different to Australian roads. So it is important when manufacturers bring cars here that they tailor these cars for our roads, and it's good that Mahindra has actually gone to the expense and effort to do that. Brands like Hyundai used to do that and have now stopped doing that, so it is good to see Mahindra actually bothering with this type of thing for Australia. I like down the front there as well, I can see a little bit of daylight coming through that aero element that spits out the side here. You've got wheel arch cladding up here, body coloured wing mirror with an indicator built into there. Have a look at these side steps, and more importantly, have a listen. So it is a proper side step, and that means that when you step on it, it doesn't feel flimsy. We've actually got the new Maric here today, and just in comparison, and I've mentioned this before on the Ranger and other utes as well, they have like plastic side steps, and the second you hit those with a rock, they're going to be destroyed. This obviously will last a whole lot longer because it is a little more rigid. It isn't going to be the be-all and end-all for rock sliding and stuff like that, but it is far more rigid and is a better option if you do actually intend to do a bit of off-roading. Down at the bottom here, you've got more of that plastic element that runs down the side of the car, chrome here on the door handles, roof rails, and then have a look at this section here. Actually lifts at the back here, so you get a little bit more headroom at the back for your passengers. There is also this stuff here because this is the Scorpio N, scorpion if you add that onto the back, so this looks like a scorpion's tail just there, which is kind of cool. Disc brakes at the rear, which is great news, and then come around to the back with me. So around here, you're going to see LED tail lamps or partial still LED, some of that is actually still halogen, but quite a nice sort of design there, and you'll be able to tell what this is when you're following it at night time. So there's the Scorpio badge with the N section in there. Down the bottom here, you've got 4 Explore, because this is a 4-wheel drive. There's also another badge around here that isn't on that side that says Adrenox, I think. I don't know what that means. If you know, let me know in the comments section below. But this is a swing open tailgate as well. I'll show you that when we actually have a look at the boot section. Towing capacity comes in at 2,500 kilos with a braked trailer. Now, let me know what you reckon about the design in the comments section below. Do you think it looks good? Do you think they've done enough with the design? I will point out just a couple of little build quality issues, fit and finish. I did notice around here on the side, this kind of sticks out a little bit there. So I think there are a couple of little things here that potentially they could do a little bit better, but for the most part, it actually looks like excellent value for a $45,000 SUV. Okay, so we are inside the Scorpio. Let's start off with the key. So here it is. You've got lock, boot, unlock. You've also got a manual key here as well, and then the Mahindra logo on the back. It's a proximity sensing key, so you can just grab the door handle to unlock the car. And you have a push button start just up the top here. Look, in terms of design, it's all sort of pretty straightforward, nothing too revolutionary here. There is the infotainment screen in the center there, piano black around the bottom section of that, but importantly, there is no sort of piano black around a lot of these high touch surfaces. In terms of the materials, it is pretty scratchy around here, so up the top there and even sort of down the sides here, the doors as well, it is sort of pretty scratchy. This center section is softer to the touch, but it doesn't quite feel as premium as something like the new Ford Everest. Keep in mind though, new Ford Everest is like double the price of this if you go for the top spec. So I think for the price that you're paying, it does feel nice, but it doesn't quite have that sort of premium touch to it. In terms of your touch points, it's nice and soft there, and soft on the door as well. How soft are they? We've got our durometer. We've tested the main surfaces in this cabin. If you want to see how this car compares to other cars that we've tested before, have a look at the link in the description below. Now, build quality. So a little bit wonky there, and I did notice as well, some of the fit and finish here isn't great. So you've got a decent sort of side gap there, and then it's flush over on this side. So I don't know, some of that stuff doesn't feel fantastic, but aside from that, it's not too bad. That's what the door sounds like. It sounds nice and solid. Okay, let's talk infotainment. So the main infotainment screen is an 8-inch color touchscreen. You can sort of use it as a touchscreen, or alternatively, you have the shortcut buttons down the bottom. So, which is great news. It means you don't have to just rely on it as a touchscreen. When it comes to smartphone mirroring, you have Android Auto at the moment, which is a wired system. That sort of works nice and quickly there. There is Apple CarPlay coming. It'll be part of a firmware update around mid-year, so it is coming. It just isn't available at the moment. You do have sort of standard Bluetooth connectivity if you need it, along with a voice recognition system that can send commands through to the phone. On the radio front, you have AM and FM radio. Unfortunately, there's no digital radio, but it is plumbed through a 12-speaker Sony branded sound system. Look, it sounds good. It's not amazing, but it's not terrible either. So that is what you get when you step up to the top spec. You get that added sound system. So if you do prefer having decent sound, it is probably worth that upgrade. In terms of the other features you have here on the screen, there is no inbuilt satellite navigation. That is all plumbed through your phone's sort of connectivity options, which keeps it pretty simple, and it means that your maps are always up to date as well, which I think is probably a good thing. Head of the driver, you have a 7-inch display. So you have 2 analog gauges and a 7-inch display in the center. So that comes with a variety of functions that you can scroll through in there to kind of give you an idea of what the car's doing, all the safety features, and also trip computer as well. Okay, now let's talk about safety. This is probably something that disappoints me about this car. There is no autonomous emergency braking, and I don't know, it's one of those features that you find on, as far as I'm aware, every single car on sale today that isn't like a hardcore sports car. And to think that this is a family vehicle that doesn't have this very, very basic safety technology, I think is very disappointing. It will come with that technology as part of a facelift, but my understanding is they sold so many of these in India that they basically sold out of the components that they need for the AEB system. They preferred to actually launch it in Australia without that tech, and they only just made a cutoff. I think it was 31st of March that any new car that went on sale legally was required to have AEB, and this went on sale just before that point. So it is worth keeping that in mind. If you are buying one of these, do note that it doesn't come with that basic safety technology. In terms of other safety features though, you do have front and rear parking sensors. There is no blind spot monitoring, no rear cross traffic alert, cruise control, but no radar functionality. So yeah, it is kind of missing a lot of the stuff that really should be standard. In terms of the camera, you have a reverse view camera in addition to those front and rear parking sensors, and a front camera as well. So I'll show you what the front camera looks like. There it is there. So the quality isn't really that good. It's a bit sort of grainy and pixelated. Then you can go for a wide angle view or a tighter view if you want. Then you can also preference either left or right. And then the last thing you can do there as well is actually zoom in as well all the way down the front there. This is kind of cool as well. You can take a picture for later, which I think is kind of interesting. And this is what the reverse view camera looks like. I'll put that into reverse. Yeah, you can't really sort of see what it says on our suitcase there. The quality isn't very good, but again, you can go to those wider displays if you want. You also have the ability to use these guidelines to get you into other parking spaces. And this is what the horn sounds like. Okay, let's talk about your practicality, and we'll start off with connectivity. So you have two USB-A ports down the front here. You have a wireless phone charging pad there. In terms of storing your phone, you can just whack it down there on that wireless charger without any dramas. Your phone fits in there as well. And then just on our coffee cup goes into there, but it kind of runs the risk of getting de-lidded because it's quite a deep hole with no teeth in it. In terms of our regular bottle, that sort of fits in there without any dramas. There is storage inside the door too. We'll try our large bottle inside the door, see how that goes. That fits in there as well. A little bit awkward to get out, but it sort of fits in there, which is all good. Now, just on your storage, there isn't really a great deal of storage here. I was hoping for a bit more because if you open this, it's like the world's smallest center console there. And then if you have your phone down here, there really aren't sort of too many other places to store things. You do have, though, a decent sized glove box that also has an air conditioning duct there as well. So it can keep things nice and cool. And finally, you do have a sunglasses holder here up the top. Now, comfort, you have dual zone automatic climate control up the front here. The driver's seat is powered, so you can go forwards and backwards. Your backrest can go forwards and backwards. You can lift the entire seat. Then you also have adjustment for your back support there as well. Passenger seat is manually adjustable. Seats themselves are quite nicely presented. You have that sort of chocolate color in the center and a darker color on the outside with perforations too to keep you nice and cool. They hug you in sort of nicely as well and are fairly comfortable. On the steering front, the steering only offers tilt adjustment. There is no reach adjustment. And on our reach test, all of this stuff is easy to reach while you're driving. Okay, second row. Now, let's start off with our room here. So my driver's seat is pretty far back and I've got really decent amount of knee room there. Toe room is excellent. Headroom is really good as well. You can see there where the roof comes up a little bit to accommodate sunroof there, but then also the extra height afforded from the outside that I showed you earlier. Now, this is a little bit strange, but I'll explain it. So this is a 6-seat setup. So there is a third row, and typically when there is a third row, it would be 7 seats like it is in the competitors in this segment. But because Mahindra can't get again, supply of the 7 seats that would normally be fitted to this car for the Australian market, they will have to make do with 6 seats, at least until that facelift arrives later on. That does have its benefits though. It means you do get quite comfortable seating here in the second row. There is also a pass-through in the center there to get to the third row as well, which makes getting in and out a whole lot easier. Other creature comforts, you have air vents here, you have a USB-C port, independent blower controls for those air vents, mat pockets in the back of the seats with phone holder as well. You do have a bottle holder inside the door there as well. Unfortunately, there is nothing here in the center for you to use as a bottle holder. You have ISOFIX points on these 2 seats with 2 top tether points as well. And on our window test, so that's manual up and down. Oh, so close. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to jump into the third row using the pass-through just to see what that's like, and then I'll get this out of the way too. So let's have a look. So often this third row in the competitor cars is just a kid's zone. So I'm keen to see what it's like for adults here. All right, so because this seat doesn't slide forwards, there isn't sort of a great deal amount of knee room here. Toe room's actually not terrible, and I can rest my feet here if I need to. Headroom is pretty compromised too for adults. You can see my head is sort of wedged into there. You do get grab handles here, plus a light as well, then a little storage nook off to the side. There is only partial airbag coverage back here as well, so that is worth keeping in mind too. But outside of that, I think if you did have to sit here for a little while, really isn't the end of the world. I am keen to see how much boot space there is though, because it doesn't look like there's a great deal. Okay, let's have a little sticky beak. So I mentioned before, this is on a door, so it opens like that. It's got a little hydraulic arm, and then you have an open from the inside as well if you do need to access that. Only downside to this setup is that if you are parked up against a wall, you need to leave yourself adequate room to open that properly. So Mahindra doesn't actually supply figures here. So I've done a bit of digging and I'll tell you what I've been able to find. Obviously behind here you have barely any room at all. You can probably fit a small bag. I'll try fit our backpack there. There you go. That kind of just fits into that slot. But you can fold this in two ways. So first up, you can just drop this down like that. So it gives you storage on top of it and in front of it if you do need that. Or alternatively, you can tumble it out of the way as well. Once it's tumbled out of the way, I think you have around 450 litres of space in this area here. You have storage underneath the cargo floor as well if you do need to hide a couple of valuables out of the way. So here's where it gets a little bit confusing. Then what you can do is fold this side, so this tumbles out of the way like I showed you before when I was in the third row. But then when you go around to do the same on the other side, it only just folds forward. It doesn't tumble out of the way. It's rigidly fixed down there. So you just end up with this very odd combination here that makes this very hard to use if you do need to load larger items, because that can't really go anywhere. It can just tumble forwards, and then you can't really sort of use any of that space as well. So I think this is pretty poorly thought out and probably needs a bit of a rework to make it more of a usable space. So we've just hit the road in the Scorpio. Let me run you through what is under the bonnet here. So it's a 2.2 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder diesel engine, makes 129 kilowatts of power and 400 Newton meters of torque, and that's all mated to a 6-speed ACEN transmission. So what does all that feel like behind the wheel? Let's give that a stab. Yeah, look, it's okay. It's not going to win any performance awards anytime soon. 400 Newton meters of torque is kind of at the lower end of where you'd want to be, especially if you are loading this up with the family. At the moment, it's just Igor and I in the car, so if you throw a few more people in here, you can imagine that it's going to get a little bit sketchy if you do need to get up and move, especially if you are towing. It has a brake towing capacity of 2.5 tons, but I think that if you are towing and have the family in the car, it is really going to struggle with 400 Newton meters. If you have a look at something like Everest, that's 500 Newton meters. Even Pajero Sport, which is probably the oldest one there in terms of the engine offering, that's over 400 Newton meters as well. So I think probably a little bit of work to be done there in terms of how punchy this feels behind the wheel. But the gearbox itself is fine. It's not exactly the sort of quickest thing in the world, but it's actually an interesting driveline because it's pretty quiet. Even when you do get stuck into it, there really isn't a great deal of noise that comes into the cabin. And when you think diesel, you do think, you know, all the noise that it's going to produce when you do get stuck into it, but this is actually quite good. So if I just roll into the throttle here now, you hear a little bit of noise inside the cabin, but it really isn't the end of the world. So I think they've done a really good job there in terms of insulating the noise between the engine and the occupant bay here where everyone's going to be sitting. Now let's talk fuel economy. So Mahindra claims just over 7 litres of fuel per 100 Ks in terms of usage. If we jump over here to our economy info, so the fuel info. So the fuel economy is 11.4 kilometres a litre, which Igor tells me is, was it 8.77? 8.77 litres per 100 Ks, which is a pretty good figure. When you look at this vehicle, it's over 2 tonnes. It is pretty impressive that being able to get an economy figure like that. So I think that is actually a pretty respectable number. We've been doing a mix of city and highway driving along with some faster laps this morning for familiarisation. So yeah, that's actually not a bad figure at all. Now let's talk about the ride. Look, I actually commend Mahindra for the amount of effort they've put into tuning this car for Australian roads. A lot of manufacturers don't bother doing it at all, which I guess signifies how confident they are in their tune, but some of them really aren't very good at all for Australian conditions. And Mahindra has gone, well, look, we're bringing this car to Australia. We want it to do well. We're going to spend the time and money to actually do a local ride and handling tune. And it has paid dividends because the ride actually feels really nice and compliant in and around the city. And when you are on the highway, really just soaks things up nicely. It's not a Rolls Royce, but it definitely doesn't feel like some of the body-on-frame SUVs in this segment. So hat off to Mahindra for an excellent job here on the ride. Okay, let's talk sine waves. So we attack our sine waves at 130, and the reason for that is it's the maximum speed in Australia, and the sine waves are a really good indication of what the body control and the ride and handling tune is actually like when you are doing something like an overtake. So here they come now, all right. It's actually really good. So they've done a good job there. With this type of tune, they've basically allowed it to be nice, soft and comfortable in and around the city. But in addition to that, they've given it the compliance it needs when you do hit those oscillations, like when you're overtaking. So I'm pretty impressed with that. Okay, so this is the bumpiest road in Australia, and we're going to do this at 90 k's an hour. We've got our condensed sine wave coming up now. See what it's like across here. Actually not too bad. It actually falls into those divots nicely, and it is handling all of these really bumpy sections fantastically. It's just soaking up all of that really nicely. So you can just see the effort they put into the ride and handling tune really has helped out here. Okay, let's go for our faster lap. Now, it has been bucketing down here, so this really isn't going to be all that interesting, unfortunately, but we'll see how we go anyway. Good brake pedal feel, that's great. I'll tip it into this corner. Oh, a little bit of tail happiness there. Yeah, look, this stability control is highly overactive. It actually reminds me of the Isuzu MU-X. It just constantly thinks that the car is going to roll over and then it just panic brakes. But once it is up and moving, it's actually not terrible. Yeah, the issue with this is that you can only drive it in two-wheel drive high range. You can't use the four-wheel drive mode on sealed surfaces, and we actually shot a video explaining why that's the case. You can watch that by clicking up here, but it is actually doing an okay job here. It does have a sort of degree of body roll, but these vehicles tend to typically have that. I'm really quite impressed with both the steering and also brake pedal feel. It's not anywhere near as agricultural as I thought it'd be. It's not going to set any land speed records, but it is doing a commendable job of holding onto the road, and yeah, it's fine. No dramas here. Quite happy with it. What about your road noise? It's actually not that bad. There is road noise that comes in on coarse chip surfaces, but this is what it looked like when we ran our calibrated sound meter across it. If you do want to see how this car compares to others that we've tested before in terms of noise, have a look at the link in the description below. Let's talk visibility. So visibility down the front there is good. The seating position is quite elevated, so I'm sitting quite high up. You can see clearly down the front of the car there. The wing mirrors are huge, which is great news because there is no blind spot monitoring, so you have to do all the work there yourself. Visibility out the back is also good, even if you do have passengers in that third row. They're not going to impede your vision too much. And then you have the cameras as well if you need to do any close quarters parking in and around the city. Okay, it's time to do a little bit of performance testing in the Scorpio. It is wet here today. So what I'm going to do is we'll line it up and start on our concrete section where it's a bit better in the wet. And if we do get any wheel slip, I'll toy around with some of these settings, but we'll see how we go. So I'm going to load up the throttle and just head all the way through to 120 so we can get our overtaking time as well and see how we go. So here it is, light up a bit of throttle. All right, hard on that. Well, it feels kind of strong off the line there, which is good. And of course you can't run this in four-wheel drive high range on sealed surfaces either. So that is why we can't do that. There's 100, running out of road. We hit 120 soon. There's 120. All right, on the brakes. Gee, it takes a long time to get above 80 k's an hour. So, all right, come to a full stop there. Okay, so 0 to 100 took 12.32 seconds, so fairly leisurely. 80 to 120 took 9.6 seconds, which is pretty slow. And to put that into context, that is your overtaking speed, and that's where I felt it drop off the most. 9.6 seconds is the amount of time it takes a lot of cars to get from 0 to 100. That's how long it takes this to get from 80 to 120. And you can consider a simulation such as overtaking a car on a freeway. It's going to take a long time to wind that on. I've got no one in the car either, so you can imagine if we actually loaded it up with people, it would be slower again. So, okay, now let's do our braking test from 100. Only thing worth pointing out here is that it is wet at the moment. So we're going to do this in the wet, but then I'll also come back and do this again in the dry, just so we can overlay those times as well, and we'll see how we go. So we hit our 100 marker, which is just there, and then slam down the anchors. Alrighty, let's have a little sticky beak. See how long it took us to stop from 100. So 3.78 seconds and 53.32 meters. So it takes a long time to stop from 100 k's an hour in the wet. Yes, it's wet, so that is worth keeping in mind. This surface isn't great in the wet either. So what we're going to do is just overlay our stopping time and distance when it is dry as well, so you do have a comparison. If you do want to see how the Scorpio compares to other cars that we've tested before, have a look at the link in the description below. You'll be able to see all the test results there and how they all compare to one another. Okay, now our reverse acceleration test. Let's see how fast it'll go in reverse. Here we go. A little bit of wheel slip off the line there. So just over 40 kilometers an hour. Okay, so Mahindra Scorpio. It's an exceptional vehicle that's let down by two, I don't know, things that they could have easily sorted out before they actually put this into production. So first up is the storage space. I just don't understand why that is such a badly set up system, especially if you want to get stuff into the car. Once you do tumble that third row out of the way, there's just no room to actually do anything properly. And then in addition to that, the lack of safety tech. It's like, guys, it's 2023, how do you not have basic safety tech like that available in a car like this that is designed to take families around? It is really, really disappointing. So if you put those things to one side though, it is fun to drive. It kind of does everything it says on the box, and it's very sharply priced with a 7-year warranty as well. So if for whatever reason safety isn't all that important to you, or active safety isn't all that important to you, and you don't mind the weird sort of setup here in terms of loading cargo and stuff, then it is going to be a pretty compelling purchase, especially when you have a look at how much everything else is in the segment. So let me know what you reckon in the comments section below. Remember, we've shot an off-road video of this as well. You can find a link to that in the description below. Let me know your thoughts on the Scorpio. Have you bought one? What did you look at instead? And did you get a chance to play with all this stuff? Let me know what you reckon. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure you like it and you share it with your mates. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon. But until next time, take it easy.